Hello one and all, welcome to RC Mojo and part 2 of our XV-01 build. Last time we did parts bag A, which consisted of the majority of the front gearbox. Today, not too surprisingly, we're going to work on bag B. Okay, we're on step 7, let's go! Start by emptying the screws into a pot so we don't lose any. There's quite a few small bits to collect for this one. We need 2 18mm screws, 2 12mm grub screws, 2 10mm screws, 4 8mm screws. Keep these separate as visually they're quite similar. And you need 4 balls. From the J parts tree you need J1, the shock tower. From the NN parts tree you need 4 NN20s and 2 NN18s. The last plastic part is K2, which I think we'll call a brace or bulkhead maybe. You'll also need to fish out the sheet of foam dust covers. Right, grab the shock tower and feed one of the long screws through one of the outer holes from the back. Do up the screw until it's all the way through the hole. Pop 2 of the NN20 spacers over the thread, then one of the balls with its hex up against the spacer. Do it up nice and tight. Repeat on the other end and you've got a complete tower. Now onto the brace / bulkhead. You need to screw a grub screw into the outermost hole. The challenge here is getting the depth right. The grubs could have done with being a bit longer, so you'll have to compromise a little. Screw them in so they're roughly halfway. You should have about 6mm sticking out. Pop an NN18 spacer over the thread, then like the tower, follow it with one of the balls with the hex up against the spacer. Do it up nice and tight. And of course, there's another one to do just like this at the other end of the brace. Find the sheet of dust covers and pull one out, and remove the little bit from the middle. Put one over each of the balls on the brace. The balls on the tower don't need them. Grab the front gearbox and line up the tower. Make sure the top of the lugs on the gearbox are free from any remains of the sprue. Then fit 4 8mm screws. This is another time to employ the cross pattern while torquing them up. Do them up until they're nicely seated and snug. Be careful of over tightening. Now the brace slots in, balls up, near the bottom of the gearbox and is held in with the remaining 2 10mm screws. Do them up so they're nice and snug and don't over tighten. That's it for the front gearbox. Why that wasn't in parts bag A we shall never know. Step 8. If you watched the first part of the build, this will be quite familiar, as the rear gearbox is almost the same as the front, just without the motor and main shaft. Not too many bits to find here. There's the middle shaft, 2 bearings, the last of the loose gears, a drive pin and 2 countersunk screws. For the plastic parts we need a pair of number 4 spacers from the NN tree and parts 5 and 6 from the A tree, the gearbox halves. Start by putting the drive pin through the hole in the middle shaft, that's at the end without the slot. Then slide the gear over, making sure the pin is fully seated in the slot. Now fit one of the plastic spacers, followed by a bearing on each end of the shaft. Okay, drop the shaft into one of the gearbox halves and offer up the other half. It should slide on nicely without binding. Don't apply any grease yet, we will do that in the next section. Fit the 2 screws, leave them just slightly loose. You want the gearbox halves to be able to move a tiny bit so they can align themselves properly when we fit the base. Step 9, and this one's a big one. Lots of bits to find, so in no particular order. From parts tree J you need part 2, the rear shock tower. From tree K you need part 1, the brace. From the NN tree you need parts 13, the pulley, 24, the pulley cap, and 12, the top hat spacer. For the metal parts there's 2 18mm screws, 7 8mm screws, an E-clip, 4 ball ends and a drive pin. And of course you'll need the diff that we built last time. Okay, start by popping the top hat spacer over the middle shaft so the narrow end fits into the gearbox. Next, put the drive pin through the hole in the shaft. Pop the two parts of the pulley together, making sure the keyways are lined up. Slide the pulley onto the shaft so that the pin fits into the slot. Grab the E-clip and slot it into its slot, then squeeze it up with a pair of pliers. If you're worried about pinging it across the room, put the gearbox in a bag to keep things contained. Apply some of the ceramic grease onto the gear inside the gearbox while turning the shaft. You don't need a lot, just enough to give a nice coat. Drop the diff in and give it a spin. You'll see the grease will spread out over the diff quite nicely. Take the gearbox bottom and line it up on the gearbox. Make sure it's the right way round. Check the diagram carefully. Fit 3 of the 8mm screws. The fourth hole is used later to mount another part. When they're snug, don't forget to tighten the 2 countersunk screws we left loose earlier. Shock tower prep now, and there's not much to do. Fit one of the ball ends, one out from the innermost hole on both sides. Make sure you put them in from the right side. Getting the brace ready is almost as simple. With the brace the right way up, screw a ball end into the 2 outermost holes. Do these and the shock tower screws up so they're just snug. Be careful not to over tighten them. Lastly, pop a dust cover over the brace's ball ends. Final assembly now. Offer the shock tower up to the gearbox, making sure there's no sprue remains to get in the way. Attach it with the last 4 8mm screws. Use the cross tightening pattern again. When they're nice and snug, pick up the brace and slot it into the gearbox as per the assembly diagram. And pop the 2 longer screws in and tighten. That's the bulk of the rear gearbox done. Just one more bit to add. Step 10. Only a small part, just pay close attention to the stacking order of the parts. Lots of small bits to collect up for this one. First is an 18mm screw with a low profile head, a nylock nut, a plain nut, 2 washers, 3 shims and 2 bearings. The goal here is to have the bearings spin freely while having the assembly clamped up and attached to the gearbox, so the bearings have to be correctly spaced off. Grab the screw and start with a washer, then a shim, a bearing, another shim, the other bearing, the third shim and the last washer. Follow that lot with the plain nut and tighten it up nice and tight. Feed the exposed thread through the slot in the gearbox. Fit the nylock nut and tighten the whole lot up. Be careful not to do it up too tight and damage the plastic. I would like to see a washer on either side of the plastic here just to spread the load a bit. Well, that's it for bag B. A little shorter in terms of content. Next time, however, bag C looks like it will have quite a bit going on. Hope the video was useful. If it was, by all means hit that like button. If you want to be told when the next part goes up, make sure you're subscribed. Our Twitter feed is starting to see some use. We've been tweeting some sneak pics of things we have in the pipe. Any comments, of course, are always welcome. The more there are, the more we can see what direction to be taking RC Mojo. As always, thanks for watching. Bye.